Welcome back to Watching Business Incorporated here on Channels Television. We started from Ghana, where the currency is poised to be one of the strongest rallies globally after the West African nation's $3 billion pact with the International Monetary Fund gave investors hope that it can climb back from last year's debt crisis. The Cedi was the best performer worldwide against the dollar in the run-up to the IMF deal, which was sealed mid-May. Beg your pardon. That was the latest in a series of violent swings since Ghana unilaterally suspended payment on most of its external debts in December. The currency is poised to end the month with a 5.3% advance and the fourth biggest of about 150 currencies tracked. Well, let's find out what this really means to Ghanaians now with Mr. Ernest Owusu-Nyako. He is a financial and management accounting expert based in Accra, Ghana. Good afternoon, Mr. Nyako. Thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon, Channels. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so the world is celebrating your currency now, but I guess the more important part will be, what's this translating to? Is it translating to better standard of living, reduction in the cost of living, or is it just celebration on paper?
So it's all of that. We actually celebrated as a country for landing this landmark bailout agreement, especially around the time where we did. And it's also accumulated in some gains. And as you rightly said, the Cedi has started to show some kind of positive impact from that. It's all good news for us because investor confidence has been increased. Our trading partners have realized that it wasn't just by means of we trying to woo them into anything, but we actually mean that we have a program which is sustainable, and it's made Ghanaians in general feel much more confident in the economy again. And as you rightly said, last year was one of the years that the economy actually really saw some kind of shocks. And even before the bailout was approved, and if you care to know, we've gotten the 600 billion of it, which has hit the central bank's account. We are having that influx of confidence into the system where Ghanaians in general feel that we are back on track to get our economy in shape.
So from here onwards, do you see the Cedi continuing to gain value and it's spreading, or is this just, that excitement on landing this bailout deal?
Well, so the bailout in itself would also put us on track. And on Sunday, when the president of Ghana, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, addressed the nation, he made mention of the fact that it's not a good thing, or it's not an easy decision for a country to decide to go in for a bailout, because it makes you put in certain measures that you would ordinarily wouldn't have put in, and it makes you streamline a lot of things. So it's more like doing a total cleanup, house cleanup, before you can get that. And the bailout in itself has given us some conditionalities which actually will be measured periodically. So it talks about making sure we protect the vulnerable in society and enforcing certain social interventions that Ghanaians naturally had, like the school feeding programs and the like, which was one of the fears for most Ghanaians going into the IMF program. But it turns out that the program in itself is actually making us pledge that we are going to sustain those programs. And it's also made it a point for the central bank to also put in measures to strengthen the financial sector of the country, among other things like encouraging public sector and private sector involvement in development. So it's kind of making all that we've always pledged ourselves as a country become more enforceable now. Because at the end of June, an assessment is going to be made for us to be able to get the next tranche of 600 in November. So it's giving us the hope that even if, let's say, authorities were not so strong on the commitments we made to ourselves as Ghanaians, now there's a reason for us to do that. And that in itself is why personally, I am happy we landed this bailout agreement.
Okay, the other part of the requirement was, I think you had 3 new bills, taxes, that were passed, and we saw a lot of protests because people will have to pay these taxes, and they're saying if liquidity is already squeezed, where do you expect us to pay more taxes? How are people adjusting to that?
So it is true we've had to look at 3 new taxes, and it also giving us another step to revise our 2023 budgets, which means that, as the saying goes, to whom much is expected, much is given. If we are expected to grow all these areas, and mind you, our cocoa sector, which used to be a very huge backbone for our economy, has suffered in the face of all these economic crises. And the program has made it a mandatory point to revamp the cocoa sector and made all public sector accountable. So in the president's speech on Sunday, we know that part of our issues as Ghanaians and this economic woes is because of how we had to handle COVID and the decisions we had to take in settling some of the COVID-related issues. And in the light of it, we are actually going back to audit all public spend in COVID and all trust funds that went into COVID to actually see whether we actually spent what we had to spend. So if the private sector is now being given leverage to be able to develop, and I've seen some financial institutions actually moving in to support SMEs, as you may call it, where the certain restrictions are being lessened. So as an SME or as an individual in the country, if I have all other burdens reduced, the government is only going to realize the benefits by way of taxes, and is not, in this case, going to just sit in a coffers or a consolidated pool, but in our case, it's going to be part of a measure to stabilize the economy, where we see lots of inflows. Because mind you, our inflation went a record high since I was born. And so to actually make sure that we can stabilize a lot of our economy in this period, the program supported our initiative to include some few taxes, which are 3 of the taxes, and a critical assessment is being made to see the impacts of those taxes to the very vulnerable in society, and as it were, the people who are actually capable of paying those taxes. As part of all those tax regimes we are trying to reform, we are trying to also widen the tax debt to make sure that every individual who is susceptible to paying tax, who has the means to pay tax, actually pays. And maybe you might not know, now paying tax has become much more flexible, such that I don't have to walk to an office as in the past to go and file and then see some middleman to do. So all those measures are being put in place so that actually as Ghanaians, we can have a feel of it. And I was very happy with the way the media and everybody around, even in the remotest part of the country, was concerned about this bailout.
All right.
Because back in the days, you wouldn't have heard of a bailout.
All right, thank you so much. I'm happy with you, for those benefits and gains that have come out of a bad situation, now turned good, at least to an extent. Thank you so much, Mr. Ernest Onwusu Yako, a financial and management accounting person from Ghana.
Thank you.